Hello, everyone. Today we have the A to Z Mysteries, The Canary Caper by Ron Roy. We're going to take a look at Chapter 3. The kids left the pet shop and headed up Main Street. They walked slowly, thinking about what to do. I've read about scientists stealing animals to use in experiments, Josh said. That's awful, Dink said. I don't want Tiger used in some experiment, Ruth Rose said. We have to find those animals. Where do the Gwynns and the Pardoes live? The Gwynns live over by us on Thistle Court, Dink said. Why don't we go talk to them? Ruth Rose said. Maybe the pet napper left some clues. The kids cut through the high school grounds and passed the circus trailers. A few of the workers were sitting at a picnic table drinking coffee. They waved when the kids walked by. Which house is the Gwynns? Ruth Rose asked when they reached Thistle Court. That big gray one, Josh said. The mailbox in front said Gwynn in black letters. Ruth Rose walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Gwynn opened the door. Hi, kids. How's your summer going so far? She said. Not so great, Ruth Rose asked. Someone stole my cat yesterday. Oh, Ruth Rose, how awful. My parrot disappeared yesterday, too. So did Mrs. Davis's canary, Josh added. We just came from the police station, Dink put in. Officer Fallon told us about your parrot. Dr. Pardew's rabbit is also missing. Mrs. Gwynn's mouth fell open. My goodness! Do you mean that 4 pets disappeared yesterday? We think so, Ruth Rose said. Where was your parrot when you last saw him? On my back porch in his cage, Mrs. Gwynn said. Can we see the cage? Dink asked. Mrs. Gwynn took them through the kitchen to a screened-in back porch. A cage stood in one corner. Archie likes it out here, said Mrs. Gwynn. He can watch the other birds in the trees. Yesterday I came out to have my lunch, but he was gone. Dink checked the screen door that led to the backyard. Was this locked? He asked. I don't really remember. We often leave it unlocked, Mrs. Gwynn said. Could Archie have opened his cage door himself? Asked Josh. Mrs. Gwynn shook her head. We always keep a clothespin on his door to make sure he can't open it. So someone must have stolen him, Ruth Rose said. Oh, dear. I don't like to think of crime in Greenlawn, Mrs. Gwynn said with a sigh. Can I offer you kids something to drink? It's pretty warm. No, thanks, Ruth Rose said. But do you mind if we look in your phone book for Dr. Pardew's address? They're at number 3 Pheasant Lane, Mrs. Gwynn said. I dropped Mike off there to play tennis with Andy Pardew. The kids thanked Mrs. Gwynn and hurried towards Main Street. This is getting weirder and weirder, Dink said. A canary and a parrot were snatched right out of their cages in broad daylight, with people home. And Tiger was probably in my backyard when she was taken, Ruth Rose said. They waved to Mr. Paskey at the book nook and headed up Aviary Way. 3 Pheasant Lane was a big green house surrounded by tall trees. A kid holding a tennis racket was sitting on the front porch. Hi, Ruth Rose said, walking up to the porch. Is Dr. Pardew home? We'd like to talk to him about his rabbit. I'm Andy Pardew, the kid said. Violet's my rabbit. Why, did you find her? No, but my cat is missing too, Ruth Rose said, and so are 2 other pets in town. Dink glanced around the Pardew's front yard. When did your rabbit disappear? He asked Andy. After lunch yesterday, he said. My sister ran into the house screaming. I went out to the cage and the door was wide open. Violet was gone. Can you show us the cage? Ruth Rose asked. Andy led them to the backyard. An empty rabbit hutch stood under a tree. Was the cage locked? Josh asked. Yep, I lock it every night myself. Andy Pardew gave them a sharp look. What's going on anyway? A ring of animal thieves? That's what we're trying to find out, Dink said. Well, let me know what you dig up, said Andy. Boy, I'd like to get my hands on the creep who did this. My little sister cried all night. The kids walked back to Woody Street. Let's stop and check in with Mrs. Davis, Dink suggested as they passed her house. We should tell her about all the other missing animals. When Mrs. Davis opened the door, she had a big smile on her face. Oh, I'm so glad to see you 3, she exclaimed. You'll never guess. A man just called. He said he found Mozart. He's bringing him here at 6:30. Isn't that lovely? That's great. Dink looked at Josh and Ruth Rose in surprise. I want you three to be here, since you were kind enough to look for him, Mrs. Davis continued. Afterwards, we'll have some of my strawberry shortcake to celebrate. Super, Josh said. We'll see you at 6:30, Dink said with a wave. The three started home. Josh grinned. I guess Mozart wasn't kidnapped after all. I guess not, Dink said. He looked at Ruth Rose. She wasn't smiling. There's one thing I don't understand, she finally said. How did he know who to call? How did the man know who Mozart belonged to? Dink shrugged. Maybe he found him near Mrs. Davis's house and asked one of her neighbors. Oh, Ruth Rose said, maybe the guy who called is the same guy who took Mozart. But that doesn't make sense, Dink said. Why would someone steal a canary on Thursday and return it the next day? For the reward, Ruth Rose said with a frown. This guy steals pets, then returns them for money. Dink and Josh just stared at Ruth Rose. They walked the rest of the way home in silence. And there you have it, the end of chapter 3. Stay tuned, guys.